Hey, story seekers. Today's guest is Mr. Mark Stephen Porro, author of A Cup of Tea on the Commode. His memoir is both hilarious and heartfelt as it chronicles Mark's return home to New Jersey to care for his ailing mother. What unfolds is a deeply human story, part comedy, part grief memoir that explores aging, obligation, and unexpected grace. Mark's background in Hollywood and theater brings a sharp, self aware humor to even the most challenging moments, while his tenderness toward his mom, Genevieve, gives the story its emotional weight. It's a reminder that sometimes our most meaningful roles in life aren't the ones we've auditioned for, but the ones we're called to step into. It is my privilege to have him on For Love of Memoir. Good afternoon, Mark. Thanks for joining me on my show today.
It is my pleasure zooming in from the south of France.
Oh,
So
I'm
it's
so jealous. I'm so
yeah.
jealous. It's on my bucket list. That's
You
beautiful wine
come,
country.
if you come to this area, it's a little town called Pézenas. It's in the southwest area between Montpellier and Béziers, and it's about 20 minutes from the sea. And you got to look me up because it's really funny. So next week will be 10 years since I landed in this village and fell in love with it and said, I'm going to buy a place here. And I bought this place, which is almost 500 years old. And
Oh,
it's been a vacation the whole time. So it's lovely and very artistic and has a lot of political art, architectural, and art history here, and it's lovely.
I can only imagine you're living my dream, sir. You're living my dream. Well, we are
Somebody
here
had to do
today.
it.
Hopefully someday, right? Goals.
Yeah,
So we're here today to talk about your book, A Cup of Tea on the Commode, which I devoured twice. It's on Audible and it's also in hard copy version.
oh my gosh, well,
I
thank you
thought
for
maybe we
that.
would just kick off today if you could just kind of give us an idea of what your book is about. How would you introduce your story to someone who doesn't know you yet?
Okay. Well, at 55, I gave up my carefree bachelor life to become a first-time parent to a 90-year-old, guilt-tripping, sharp-tongued, stubborn as all get out lady who could barely remember my name, my mother. And it's rare for a son to jump in to take over 24/7 caregiving, but I did it with gusto and tried to fill my mom's last years with love, laughter, and joy. Not always successful, but I came pretty damn close. And so that's what the book is about. We had a 3.5 year adventure, and um, and I wouldn't have traded it for the world.
Wow, it's an absolutely fascinating story. Tell us a little bit about your life was like, what your life was like before you moved back home to take care of your mom.
Very different. All right, guys. So I grew up in a little village, what they call the village of Ridgewood. It's around 25,000 people. And that was a great little town to grow up in, a really good educational system. And my parents were both pretty strict Catholics. And my dad was a chemist. My mom was a proofreader for the largest newspaper in New Jersey, the Bergen Record. And they had 6 kids, and I'm the fifth, third son, and the tallest. And then I went to Ohio State University, originally for medical school. But I thought I was going to get bored with all that because I had a very strong creative side. Part of that was my mom's fault. She introduced us to a lot of the arts and stuff as we were growing up. And so I switched over to industrial design. And by some small miracle, Ohio State, I didn't even know that profession existed. But Ohio State was one of the best schools in the country at the time. And so I really lucked out there. So I got a great education. And then I worked for two really good design firms. The second one, they came after me, which was really kind of fun. And I worked there for a bit. And then the acting bug bit me. And so I gave up a really good design career to go for the really secure life of being an actor in Hollywood. And yeah, so I moved out to LA, and I did have a design job waiting for me. I knew I didn't want to, be on the streets or be a waiter. Nothing wrong with being a waiter, but the only time I was a waiter was on television. So I made really good money. The tips sucked, but the money was pretty good. So I was out in LA. Now I wanted to be a good actor, and I had a connection actually through that design firm with an agent. And she said, read this book. It was written by an acting teacher who was really good at acting marketing and all that business. And so I bought the book before I went back to Ohio, and then I started studying with him as soon as I moved out there because I wanted to be a good actor, and my goal was to get on Hill Street Blues. And so I studied my tail off and studied for actually most of my 28 years there. And less than 2 years later, I got on Hill Street Blues. So that was very cool. And
Wow.
design actually helped pave that way because I got a call. Again, I had from my design and marketing experience, I knew how to kind of market myself. And so I sent out letters to everybody with your headshot. And at that point, my resume was pretty sparse. So the letter had to be pretty, I guess, clever. And it was on my own letterhead. And a casting director who was casting about 4 shows, I think, at that time. She was one of the big ones. She called me. She said, I have good news and bad news. She goes, the good news is I really like your letterhead. My boyfriend's a graphic artist and I know good design and I like it. Second, it's not about acting. But would you be interested in designing the national logo for the Casting Society of America? And at that point, the casting directors are the gatekeepers. But they didn't form a union. I don't know if it's an official union, but they didn't have an organization at that point. They all got organized and they didn't have a logo and they wanted a national logo. And my background was corporate identity, which is now called branding, but that
Yeah.
was my specialty. So I said, sure. And I got to meet all the movers and shakers in Hollywood through that job. And it was great. And so one of the casting people who was on the board of directors was the Hill Street Blues lady, Sally Powers was her name. And I guess a few months later, so she calls, she says, you might be right for this part. Come in. And again, you have to prove yourself. And I guess I nailed the audition and I got that a part of the assistant DA on Hill Street Blues, just for one episode. But if you get that on your resume, especially your first job,
Sure.
it puts you at a certain level, which was really good. So that's how we got started. But then, so the first week I actually did an independent film, um, again a union film, and when the work goes into overtime, it's great because the pay just skyrockets. So that went into overtime, and then I did Hill Street Blues, and that went into like double golden time or something like that. So my first week in Hollywood, I made over 2 grand. I said, "Oh, I got this thing," and then I didn't work again for 7 months. So,
As is
uh,
the way the industry works, right?
yeah, yeah. So if you don't jump off a cliff in between, it's really the highs are really fun, the lows are really kind of sucky,
Sure.
but you gotta deal with all that stuff. So
Sure. What a fantastic gateway story, though.
yeah, it was.
Impressive.
Yeah, I was again very fortunate. I think a lot of it is if you have a good attitude, things seem to come.
I
Whether it's
agree.
serendipity or the universe says, "Oh, we like this guy. He wants to be on Hill Street Blues. Let's make it happen."
I agree.
So that's how I kind of looked at it. And then what was nice about Hollywood, it got me into writing. I always kind of joked around and did funny stories and wrote funny songs and stuff growing up. But the formal writing thing didn't happen until I took a particular class, and they said, at the end of this class, you'll be writing a scene and you'll be casting it, and it will be performed in front of the class. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, we're in the big time now. This was really scary because you're in Hollywood. But I did it. I wrote this scene that actually came out of an incident that happened in life, and I cast it well. And these 2 guys just nailed it, and it was fabulous. And I said, "Boy, I'm hooked. This is
Sounds
great."
like
So,
you've lived a lot of life. That's a
well, yeah.
that's a great segue. What was the catalyst to writing your memoir?
Well, okay. So while I'm doing this with mom, I always like to record family history. So I knew because I was privy to some conversations and some moments that I didn't want my siblings. My dad passed about 14 years earlier, but I didn't want my siblings to miss these things because I thought they were really fun and precious, and I didn't want them to be lost with me. So I started recording these things. I shot videos and shot a lot of photographs, but that was just kind of in my nature. And part of that, I think, came from my first design job, because anytime I had an argument with the boss, who always said, "Did you write it down? Did you write it down?" And so I actually called him like 20 years later, because he was not happy that I left his firm for the big guys. I called him up and I said, "I want to thank you because I write everything down now."
Yeah,
And
I'm sure.
so,
I'm always so fascinated at how like I can look back on my life, little things that I did that I thought were completely trivial that 10 or 15 years later, having that skill will actually come into play later on in life. And I'll think, wow, how amazing that I had like that little tiny bit of experience in that one little spot. It's incredible.
yeah. And again, whether that's serendipity or what, but these things, and a lot of those little things, like you said, those little moments in life, helped me in through this situation with my mom,
Sure.
which was great. So, and very welcome. So, but while I was taking care of her, again, I'm a bachelor. I didn't have any kids. I didn't have any, I was never married and stuff. So this was all kind of new to me. And, but again, I went with an open attitude and an open heart. And while I was doing it, I thought I was doing some pretty good stuff. And I think from a son's point of view, I took kind of a romantic approach, and we'll get into that. But I had another friend who was going through something similar. She just started it with, I think, her father at the time. And so I started sharing some of the things I was doing and some of the things I learned actually from hospice. Hospice was great. So when I got home, when this whole thing started, my mother was like on her deathbed, and hospice was there. And my younger sister and I hung out with hospice. All the kids came back because we were on death watch. And we hung out with hospice because we wanted to learn all the tips and tricks we could learn, because we wanted to take care of mom as much as we could, as long as she wanted to be here.
Yeah.
And I think she felt that, but hospice was great and very generous. And so I shared some of those tips and tricks with my friend, and she got a lot out of it. And I said, well, I think I got something here, because I knew I was going to record it in some way, whether a book, I wasn't sure. But for me, from my experience in Hollywood, it was definitely going to be an idea for a movie, a
Yeah.
screenplay. And as you read in the book, there's the bookends. And so that's very theatrical or cinematographic kind of thing.
Right.
And that's how I see things. I first see them as a movie, and then what could I do with it? But a book was going to be a quicker way to get this story out that I thought could benefit people and hopefully inspire people, and not be afraid of this thing, because I think it's going to be, well, it's not just me, but an impending crisis. We're all living longer,
Yes.
and we got to deal with this. It's going to be a financial and I think healthcare stress
Exactly,
on,
especially with the baby boomer generation.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we're
I've
all
agreed.
facing it. Luckily, I can, my experience was a pretty positive one. And so if I can inspire some people to take this on, because I learned so much, and it was great. And if I have to say, it was the best role I've ever played. So Hollywood kind of came in, and my design experience and the marketing and all that stuff all kind of came together for this experience. And whether it prepped me or not, it certainly made me a more comfortable doing it, or open to doing it, and not taking things personally and all that kind of stuff. So the thick skin from
Sure.
Hollywood helped, and some of the clever things I learned from both of my parents and stuff growing up certainly came into play as well.
That's beautiful. A cup of tea on the commode. That I have to tell you is what caught my attention as I was scrolling through Audible looking for books to listen to. Can you
Oh,
just give us,
good.
I know it's in your book, right?
Yeah.
But can you
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
give us a brief idea of how you came up with that catchy title?
Well, as I'm writing the book, I had another title in mind, and as I got further and further into the book, this just kind of popped up, and it popped up because of a practical thing we did every day. So We had a commode bedside because it was not safe to get mom out of bed and all the way into the bathroom and back and stuff like that. So we put a commode bedside. And sometimes Mother Nature took a little longer than was comfortable for either one of us. And so, kind of as a joke, I offered her her favorite beverage was hot tea, skim milk, and no sugar. And I said, "Would you like a cup of tea while we're waiting?" And she said, "Sure." And it became a hit. So that became part of our morning ritual. And once that thing came into my head, I said, I think that's a very
That's it.
catchy title.
Yep.
And so far it's paid off. But I've had a
Yeah.
couple people say, "Oh, just because of that title, I bought the book."
Yes.
Or other people have said, "Just because of that title, I almost avoided this." So it's interesting. It gets their attention, whether it's positive and negatives and other
That's the
things. But
point, right? It gets
yeah,
their
yeah, yeah.
attention.
But nobody who has read the book, I mean, I've got a couple of one stars, but anybody who mentioned anything about that title, they loved it once they got into it.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. You really kind of, it was an overarching theme throughout your entire book. You really leaned into humor when caring for your mom. Were there times when you could identify that it probably saved you both your sanity?
Well, throughout life, sure. Both of my parents were pretty funny people. And my mom was, boy, even in this, because she suffered a little of dementia. And later on, actually, a doctor who made house calls said she had a little bit of Alzheimer's. And we can go into that too. But she still came up with some funny stuff. Um, and I lean on it a lot, and there's a lot of like I would say even dark humor in the book,
Mhm.
and just throughout life, boy, it just it comes in so handy.
Yes.
But one time, mom asked me why I treated her so well, and I said, "Because you're my mom, and you deserve to be treated like a queen." And then she burped, and I said, "Well, queens don't do that." She said, "How do you know?" Which is great. I mean, who comes up with this? And there was another time, again, so I gave her sponge baths morning and night. So it was quite a routine to go through both ways. But at night, she's on the commode, you give her a sponge bath, you give her some lotion, you take care of any medical needs, and then you close up the diaper and then get her night dress on. And just as I'm closing up the diaper, she starts peeing on me. Now, that's really cute if you're a new mother
A
with a
baby.
newborn. But when it's your 90-year-old mother peeing on you, it's a bit different. So I said, "Mom, come, why now? Because
Right.
I'm just about done." And she says, "It's natural." And you go, "How can I be angry?"
You can't even argue with
Yeah, it
that.
just and it's so true. So I just started up again and then kind of double checked, I think, before before I put a new diaper on.
I'm
Um,
sure. I'm sure.
So
Lessons learned
I
all
mean,
along the
those
way.
things, there's other funny stuff that comes up, and there was so one of the two of the main things I wanted to do when I took this on is return dignity to her,
Mhm.
personal dignity, because I felt it was whittled away over the years with other people who were supposedly kind of caring for
With
her.
the Tweedles.
The
With the
Tweedles,
Tweedles.
for legal reasons, the Tweedles. Um, but I bought her a new wardrobe. That was the first thing. And I said, "You want to cheer anybody up at any age, especially a lady,
That's
a new
right.
wardrobe will do it." So because she had old drab night dresses that I said, "I don't want my mom looking like an old lady." And I didn't want her smelling like an old lady. That's why I did the sponge baths twice a day. And she loved that. And it was great. But then also she was like a baby. She slept a lot during the day. And so I said, "I'm going to renovate her house." This was the house we all grew up in. And it was not, it was somewhat, I guess, in disrepair and it had been neglected and stuff like that. So I decided to renovate, and I had those skills from experience and stuff like that. And so I would go out to Home Depot, and sometimes when I would come back, what we'd normally do after the meals, I'd set her in this big, comfy, one of those reclining, cushy chairs in the living room and park her in front of the television where she could watch Animal Planet all day long. And so when I'd come back from Home Depot, which was luckily not very far away, I'd be bringing in the materials, two by fours and things like that. And we had this ongoing conversation, the same one for a number of days. And she'd just be watching all this stuff pass by and she'd go, "What in the world is going on?" And I said, "Mom, I'm making your house beautiful again." She goes, "Well, who is paying for all that?" I said, "You are. So cheer up. You might have to go back to work." And so we did that for several days. But one of the bonuses of going to Home Depot is I passed McDonald's on the way back, and I always bought her a fruit smoothie.
Oh
So she got a bonus out of it. So she liked it. But usually she'd be sucking on that straw, going, "What is
my
going
God.
on?" And it was
Oh,
lovely. So the first floor that I did was the basement. And so, and I had her, I involved her in all the paint colors and things like that, and showed her what I was going to be doing. And when we were finished, the last thing we're doing is I have the carpet guys coming in. So I got carpet samples, and there were 3-inch squares, and I put those on her, two of them on her breakfast tray, and then went in to fill up her juice cup. And when I came back, she had one of the samples in her mouth with a scowl on her face, and she said, "This is not a cookie."
that cracked me up.
And I said, "No, Mom, it's not. It's a carpet sample. Which tastes better?" And she chose well. And so we went with that one.
A
So
smart woman,
again,
smart woman.
she didn't get really upset about it, but it was very funny. I don't know if we want to do the bathtub one, but that was another.
Sure. Yeah, please do.
So the almost the last thing I did was I renovated the top floor, and we had a bathroom because we had 6 kids. We had a boys' side and a girls' side. Well, I stripped that all down and made one big bathroom because it was about 100 square feet. And so I put not only a nice glass shower, but I wanted to put a huge bathtub. So I put the huge bathtub, and when I finished that, whenever I finished anything, I would carry Mom down or up to see things. And so I said, "Do you want to christen the new bathroom with a bubble bath?" And she said, "Sure." And so I made a nice bubble bath. I put her in and covered up the certain areas and shot a picture. And she was just smiling from ear to ear. And I said, "This is great." She's happy as can be. And then she passes out. And I'm thinking, "Oh, great. I try to do a nice thing and I kill my mom.
Oh gosh.
And how am I going to explain this to my siblings?" But at least she smelled good. So it wasn't all bad. So, but again, I thought she was kidding because she had a wicked sense of humor. And so I'm like tapping her on the face, going, "Mom, hello, hello, Mom." Nothing. So I pulled her out and then dried her off and still out. So I carried her downstairs to put her to bed, and they called up a nurse. And the nurse said she fainted. You left her in the hot water too long. And with the low blood pressure, she fainted. And so about a half hour later, she woke up. And she didn't remember passing out, but she did remember the new bathroom.
I bet she
Uh,
did. I bet she
so
did. For the
good,
first and
good for
last
me.
time, I imagine.
Yeah, yeah, no more baths.
I
Sponge
bet.
baths, yes, but no bubble baths. Yeah,
Great.
so those are the things. It's like, again, you're a new parent and you don't know, you test the water like you test the milk for the baby and stuff like that. And
Sure.
the
You learn
water
as you
wasn't
go.
too hot, but for in her condition, yeah, it was too long. So, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about, I'm glad she was okay, by the way. I can imagine the
Well,
panic that
me
set
too.
in
This
when
would
you
be a
realized.
different conversation.
I'm sure. I'm sure. I can only imagine the panic once you realized she wasn't joking. So I'm glad everything turned out okay. And I'm glad she got to test ride her bathtub at least once.
Yeah,
Let's talk a little bit about your documentation process. You were mentioned earlier, it might have been before I hit record, that you wanted to document for the sake of your family so that all those memories weren't lost.
yeah.
Tell me a little bit about how you did that. You said pictures. Did you journal every day? Like,
Yeah.
what was your
I don't know
process?
about every day, but yes, I definitely
Okay.
took lots of notes. And the photos and the videos. I at one point I bought one of these things. It wasn't quite a GoPro, but that kind of thing, and I had it on my. I put it on a hat, and I
Smart.
went through the entire routine that I did every day, which was pretty extensive, and I document that in the book.
Yeah,
Um, but I don't know if I would remember all that stuff. So I did. So the whole thing is videoed.
sure. Yeah,
And so
that's so
that helped.
smart.
And then other videos I shot of of various things and tons of photographs, but most of it was the note taking. And and then I also had my siblings to bounce things off of. But it's funny, especially when you write memoir. And I learned this from my memoir teacher, because that was a new genre for me. So I studied memoir with Marion Roach Smith, who was wonderful. And she has a sister who's also a writer,
Mhm.
and they have very different recollections of the same event.
Isn't
And the
it
one
crazy how that
sister,
happens?
once she wrote something, her sister said, "That's not what happened." And she said, "I know, that's not what happened to you."
You're right.
And
Right.
so, and I do have I think a really good memory. So there are certain incidents where I'll lean on somebody or a sibling if I needed it, and other times it's like, well, that's not the way it happened, but we're just going to have to ignore that and go back to my notes and stuff like that. So,
Sure.
um, but again, that came from that my first boss said, "Did you write it down?" So I wrote it down. Also, my dad, so 14 years earlier, my dad passed. I only had 8 days with him, and I wrote a lot of notes. Again, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but I wanted to document because, again, I spent most of those 8 days with him. And so we had some lovely conversations and some really cool stuff that we discussed. And one of the things that said, but it gave me a movie idea. I wrote him a really nice letter. Again, these are like little tips. Don't wait. So I wrote him a letter about why I loved him and appreciated him
Mm.
about a month or so before he died. And he was blown away by this thing. He goes, "I don't know who you're talking about." And so we started to discuss it. And I knew I had a short time with him. So I didn't want to dwell on it because he said he wrote me a response and he sent it to me. So I said, "Okay, well, let's move on to something else. I'll read your response. But this time is, precious. So
Mhm.
let's move on." I never got that letter. So I don't know what happened because the computer was new to him. My brother set up a computer for him, and he had some pretty heavy fingers. And I'm not sure what happened. I saw pieces of it in extra paper that was there that he tried to print and didn't print. But anyway, I never got that letter. And I thought it could be really a fun idea that kid, that son gets that letter years later and
Yes,
finally gets found.
absolutely.
So
No, I think
that's
that's
an
a great
idea.
screen
But
idea.
so anyway, the next project I'm working on is those 8 days and a few other things. So it's focusing more on my dad, and so that will definitely be, I guess, explored a little bit more.
Oh,
But that
I'm
that
definitely
was a
looking
real
forward to that.
shame. But
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like you just kind of have a knack for balancing humor and depth all together. Did you struggle with that at all while actually writing your memoir?
um, I don't know if I struggled. I mean, so what I did originally, I struggled with the structure. So what I did originally is I wrote, let's say, chronologically what happened in
Yep.
these 3.5 years. But that could be really boring. That's like, oh, and then we did, and then we did, and then we did. So I knew that was going to be a problem.
Yep.
So
Struggle
then
is
I
a
wanted
per
to weave in backstory that
yeah.
helps support um, my decisions in the current situation. And so I may have like written all that stuff, the vomit draft or whatever. And then you go in and say, I can, punch this up a little bit.
Mhm.
But it wasn't punching up for the sake of a laugh. It was punching up going, oh yeah, I remember this is a funny
Yes.
moment.
Yes.
And uh, but a lot of that just came out. I didn't have to try it. I mean, in the book, and I don't know if I did it in the audio. I don't remember now, but in the book, in the top of every chapter, there's usually some dialogue that we went through, and
Mhm.
those were funny. Most of those were just very funny things, and that just came out of we grew up. There was a lot of humor in the house.
I love
Um,
hearing that. I love
yeah,
hearing.
and it was great. And both of my parents were funny. All the siblings are pretty wacky, and we get along really well, especially if we're dealing with humor and not talking about politics or religion. So whoever
Yeah,
came up with that way back when
it
was
was
a
brilliant.
genius. I mean, oh my God. Anyway, but so humor is a big part of my life. And what's fun is I did stand up for a while too. And I guess people say, oh, we don't expect that to come out of you because you look like so straight
Sure.
and stuff. And so again, that was just like whether it's a dry sense of humor or a dry wit or something. Because my dad told a lot of corny jokes and stuff like that, but he never went like "bada boom" and then I need the rim shot. And then mom would just come out with stuff. And I don't think she tried to be funny. She just was. Well, you heard the thing again. I don't know how she comes up with this, but the story about the two G's was hysterical, and it was so the girls that were sitting at that booth were just on the floor laughing, and mom's like, what I say,
She doesn't even realize she's so funny, right?
yeah,
Well, it sounds like you come by it quite naturally, and I have to say, in the book, you struck a really good balance with it. You really did a great job of describing a day in the life of a caregiver, which is not easy. Like I watched my mom do this for my grandmother, and that's not an easy job. But like most things in life, if you don't find humor in it, it'll take you down, right?
yeah, 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 yeah,
Were there
yeah. You
any
gotta.
parts that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, well, I was gonna say that one of my goals again in the beginning was I wanted to make her laugh at least once a day.
Oh,
And she ended up making me laugh quite a bit. And
what a fabulous goal. Were
yeah,
there any parts that you found particularly difficult to write or that you found particularly healing, maybe?
healing definitely difficult to write. Yes, the book. Mom passed in 2014, and I had all the notes, and I'm I guess kind of like a streak writer. I don't sit at the chair every day, and but I have ideas a lot. So I have a notepad by my bed and notepads everywhere, and sometimes they're just scribbly things like this.
Yep.
And I keep track of all that stuff. So I knew I couldn't sit and write the book because I'm a crybaby. I'm very
Mm.
emotional, especially when it comes to family. And there would be moments of that weren't even particularly sad that I'd just start bawling and go, "Thank God I'm alone because this is embarrassing." So it took a couple of years before I could really sit down and uh, do anything, I guess, substantial with the book. Studying the genre with my teacher and reading a bunch of other memoirs certainly helped. But
You mentioned
yeah,
that you
so
struggled with structure, which is my perpetual struggle. I feel like I go back and battle that all the time. Can you
yeah.
tell us a little bit about what was it specifically that you struggled with when it came to your structure?
Well, I knew there was a lot of backstory that I wanted to add, and as I'm writing the, let's say, the present day stuff, things what I love about writing, and it's kind of fun, at least for me, but you write, and then all of a sudden, all these other memories open up, and you're
Hmm.
going, okay, this one would be good for this particular chapter, and
Yeah.
this one will work here. But um, my, let's say, experience or whatever may have influenced that in, let's say, not a great way for someone who doesn't know me or my mom, Genevieve, by the way, to say her name. And uh, uh, so I needed fresh eyes to look at that. So I had all the stuff, but I played around. Okay, so do I do a present chapter and then a flashback, or do I do a whole section? And I think the first edit, actually, I hired my memoir teacher to be my first editor, and I think she said you got to get to this sooner because I,
Hmm.
I went through a certain period. I think the whole before and after the Tweedles was a big part, and she
Yeah.
said you got to get rid of the Tweedles earlier. It's not the story about the Tweedles. Uh,
Okay.
So they're the problem, but get rid of them and let's move on. This is a mother-son story. Uh,
I can imagine that that was probably pretty therapeutic for you too, to kind of have to put a bow on it and set it aside now, right?
and I could write a series on those, my experience
Sure.
with them alone.
I'm
which I
sure,
still
and I
may
love
do.
the name.
I may do. I may. Yeah. I mean, some of those were so fun. I mean, again, I needed my humor in that because
Of
they were.
course.
It was a horrible situation, but
Yep.
I had so much fun with it. Oh, I'll tell you one story with my mom. So they were caring for my mother for like 3.5 years before
Hmm.
I entered the picture, and for legal reasons, they stayed for like another 6 months. And so they thought they knew mom. And mom could be a tough cookie, and she had that BS detector, and that went off. It was trouble getting her back, and so
Sure.
this went off early, and but they both hit it very well. We knew there was tension. At least I knew the people who came in to visit would see this tension and feel it, but we didn't know how deep it was, and so when I'm there, I'm doing all the cooking for my mom and stuff like that, and these people were doing it all these 3.5 years before. So I'm cooking lentil soup on
Mhm.
the stove. And Tweedledum comes over and says, "Oh, your mother doesn't like soup." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yes, she won't eat soup." I said, "If it's served with love, she will eat it." And she goes, "You want to bet?" And at this point, we had I think in writing when they have to leave. And so she says, "You want to bet?" And I said, "Yeah, if I win, will you leave early?" And she kind of bit her tongue and left the room. And so I videotaped this. I brought mom the lentil soup. Now, I don't know if my mother overheard this conversation or not, but she downed that lentil soup about a minute. And I
Get him
filmed
out of
it.
here.
I needed the evidence. She just went, and I don't know if she loved it or not, but she loved it. She certainly pretended to love it. That was the funniest thing.
How did
And
you
I
even
showed that
maintain your
video.
composure? I would have
Oh, well, that
absolutely lost it.
payback was just precious. There was another time I told her, or she accused me of accusing her. And she says, when you accuse somebody, you're actually accusing yourself. You're pointing back at yourself. And I said, "Oh, really?" So I said, "Since I'm accusing you and you're pointing back at me, aren't you, in fact, pointing right back at yourself?"
We could go
And her
on and
mind
on.
almost blew. I just love doing that stuff because it was fun, and I had to find humor in it because it
Yes,
was really, that was tough. And we lost, I think, some really good time with mom because we
sure.
had to deal with this stuff. And
Because of it.
yeah, but
Mark, what did
it's
you learn
okay.
about yourself during those years?
Well, again, not having kids and no marriage and stuff like that, I didn't have a really good grasp, I would say, of unconditional love. And
Okay.
yeah, I think I mean, I kind of knew my mom's life was in my hands, but boy, when you sign the do not resuscitate clause from hospice and you put your signatures on that, that's where it really hits home. And that was tough. So again, with unconditional love, no matter how difficult this was, mentally, physically, emotionally, it's her life is still in my hands. So I got to step up and do the right thing, even during those tough times. So that was a big deal. But one thing that was very cool about, so I finished the book, found a publisher, which was lovely. They resonated with it, and we spent about a year and a half going back and forth. And this is the two editors that I worked with the publisher were fabulous, and they helped me with that structure issue because
Okay.
they were fresh eyes looking at this, and they say,
Yes.
"Yes, this doesn't make sense. How about we move this to this and things like that." I had the
Yes.
final say on everything, but I thought almost all their suggestions were fabulous and very helpful. It was my first book, so I was very open to hearing the experts. Um, but I did. So the book came out on Mother's Day
Hmm.
in 2023, almost 2 years now, and I couldn't do the audiobook again because even chapters that weren't emotional, I would just baseball. Ah, and I'm going, what? what is, because maybe I'm thinking ahead or whatever. It was very difficult. So I took about 6 months, I think, before, and I set up a studio here
Hmm.
in another room, and I recorded it and did everything, and it was ended up being great. But during those 6 months, I had time to obviously reflect and make some changes. A couple of my siblings said I got a couple things wrong. So I fixed those in the audiobook. And so if you look at this story, let's say as you read it, it sounds like Mark went back to rescue mom.
Hmm.
And in a sense, I did. But upon reflection, I'm thinking, I'm going to get emotional. Um, it's perhaps mom rescued me.
Oh,
Because at that point, I accomplished a lot of things in life, but nothing really that important.
yeah.
And she gave me this opportunity, whether she was willing or just happened or whatever. But that she gave me that opportunity, and luckily I was smart enough, or I mean, certain circumstances all came together. I jumped on it, and it was the best thing that I did. And I wouldn't have traded any of it, even though I almost died during it. She almost outlived me because of the stress and stuff. But um, the ice chips in the hospital were excellent. It almost made it all worth it. So
It's amazing how good those can taste, right?
yeah, they're real and refreshing as can be. And the drugs were amazing. What was
Yes.
interesting about that, because from my design experience and certainly in acting, empathy is a huge component.
Hmm.
And in design, when you're designing anything, you have to take into consideration the end user, whether
Hmm.
it's a brochure or a
Sure.
machine, coffee maker, things like
Yeah.
that. And when you're caregiving, and especially a loved one, you have to take that, you have to know that they are the main thing. And you
Yeah.
have to walk in their shoes, or in my mom's case, the non-slip safety socks.
Hey,
Um,
it's
and
empathy, like you said.
they're your mother, and they're not the same person they were. They're going to be slower. They may forget your name, which happened. And again, you can't take that stuff seriously, um, or personally. I guess you could take it seriously. And so it was very those things again. Whatever life threw at me, it all seemed to come together and help in this particular quest. And so. Um,
Let's talk about that. You talk about it in your book, the first time your mom forgot your name.
Mhm.
Kind of tell us like what was going on in your mind? How did you respond to that?
Well, this is again several months into this. So I'm wiping her butt several times a day. And I'm the only kid of her six that's wiping
Yep.
her butt several times a day. And so, again, she had a wicked sense of humor. So I came in one morning and she looks at me and she's all chipper and she says, "So, what is it I call you?" And I said, "You're kidding, right?" And she's like, "No." And I said, "Name your kids." And she says, "Laurel, Michael, Carol, David, DC." And and she was stumped. And I said, "Mark." She goes, "Oh, Mark." And I thought, okay, we're good. Mark. Mark with the K? And I said,
Oh my
"Yes, you named
goodness.
me." Mark with the K, your favorite son. And she goes, "I don't have favorites."
Oh,
Then under my breath, I said, "Well, you have a favorite to forget."
I'm
And
sure. I'm
so
sure.
instead of taking that personally, I printed my name in big block letters and taped it to the ceiling. So when I would greet her in the morning, she'd be laying in bed and it's so looking up usually. So I'd say good
First
morning,
thing
and
she
she'd say
sees.
good morning. Her eyes would shoot to the ceiling for the visual aid and come back and be very proud, Mark. And it was, and then it became we made a game of it. Sometimes she cheated, sometimes she didn't, and so I had a lot of fun. So again, you could take that very personally, but
Sure.
it's normal. We forget, I walk into the next room, and you're going, "Hmm, why did I come in here?" And you go back and you figure it out. So I can remember things when I was 2 years old, but whatever I was going for in that room, I have no idea.
Yep.
So
I mean, you just Seems like you do that with everything. You just kind of lean into the humor of it. Good for you. Although I can't imagine that wasn't gut-wrenching on the onset, right? Looking at your mom who's looking you right in the eyes and does
Well,
not remember your name.
well, I guess again, I didn't take it too seriously. I thought,
Good. Good for you.
the end goal was the keep her happy and healthy and smiling and I got a good chapter out of it. So
Right.
the title is "Does Wiping Butt Cause Amnesia?" And I think I have proof that in fact it does.
It definitely did in this case.
Yeah.
So was there something that nobody told you about caregiving that you wish you had known when you stepped in to help Genevieve?
Well, definitely about the bath, because that was the closest we got to losing
Yep.
her. Um, um, boy, I don't know. It was my younger sister, DC, and I were uh, open to learning as much as we could from hospice. So they were great. I mean, we learned a lot of stuff that I'm not sure if it would have gone as well if we didn't have those tips. Your loved one is fragile at that point, so there's a way to pick them up, and there's a way to handle them, and there's I don't know. I mean, I learned, let's say, more patience than I normally had. Um, I think I wish I paid a little more attention, obviously, because she almost outlived me. Was the main tip from the pros is you got to care for yourself. You got to take
Learned that the
breaks.
hard way, huh?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, that was good. You're sitting there going, oh, this, yeah. Yeah, so don't do that. So there's a reason why on an airplane they say put your oxygen mask on first
That's
before
right.
you
They're not
attend to your loved
joking. They're
ones.
not joking around.
Yeah. And even I kind of knew because when I did the basement was the first floor that I renovated. I made a man cave in there. I
Yeah.
bought a rowing machine and I had weights and I and just tearing that place apart was good stress relief. But apparently not enough.
Not
So
enough, not enough of a break.
hmm?
I said, and not enough of a break, apparently. If
Yeah,
people want to
yeah,
hear about that, they can read your book.
yeah. We're
What
keeping.
was the thing that surprised you the most about releasing your story to the world?
Well, it's scary. Well, it's my first book, right? So it made it
Hmm.
even scarier. And but I kind of been through this, when you write screenplays and then you send them out for critiquing and stuff like that, and
Hmm.
sometimes they're just brutal. But you learn from that. And so
Yep.
with this, it's a very personal story, obviously, and but it's also a universal story. I say it's timely and timeless because again, baby boomers especially, we're all going to have to deal with this. And um, but I had no idea how it was going to resonate with others.
Right.
And also even with my siblings, because I didn't let them read anything. I think there was one chapter that was pretty neutral, that, the older siblings would know more. They had more experience with my dad and
Hmm.
mom's relationship and stuff. So I did send, I think, a chapter about them because I wanted to know what do you remember about mom's early life? Because
Hmm.
again, those two people grew up in that generation of growing up in the early 19th. That was 1915. Mom was 1922. They didn't talk a lot. They didn't
Right.
talk about feelings or even their families all that much. So
Different
there were some
times. Yeah.
surprises. So I wanted to know, and actually, one of my sisters knew quite a bit that I didn't know about mom's experience, actually in the publishing world and stuff like that, because her father worked for a printing company, and so she got into reading novels for Doubleday and stuff. That's where she got into the proofreading, which was pretty interesting. Um, but again, out in the real world, no idea. And then reviews started coming in, and they were great, very encouraging, and then personal notes started coming, and then as I grew, let's say my followers and stuff on Facebook, especially the ones from my hometown, people knew my siblings and they knew my parents and they wrote notes. There was a lovely letter that is in the book from my brother's old girlfriend. Once she heard I was taking care of mom, she says, "I want to write you this letter."
Yeah.
Write her this letter, and I had no idea how deep their relationship was, and that was a lovely surprise. And it was what's funny about that too. Mom hadn't heard from Kathy in over 40 years, but she remembered her name.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm sure once you released, you probably you mentioned that the notes started rolling in. I'm sure this story probably touched a lot of lives. Are there any of those notes that kind of come to mind?
Well, one in particular. Well, there's two. One that I really know. A friend of mine, originally from New York, but we were acting together at the Beverly Hills Playhouse.
Uh-huh.
And so again, I wrote personal notes on Facebook to everybody, and including Jody. And she said, she wrote back. She goes, "I know you're doing this to everybody, but and I want to support you, but my father just died a month ago, so
Oh,
I can't read this thing." And I understand. Don't worry about it. You know, you got to heal and grieve, and I believe me, I understand. And then about a month later, she wanted books for her and her sister and her brother, and the sister and brother were still back east,
hmm.
and they were the main caregivers for the father. And so she ordered books, and I had a friend here going back to Colorado because again, mailing from here is ridiculous. And so I gave her the three books autographed and shipped there. And she was going back to New York for the 4th of July. And she said, "Look, you know, on Facebook, she's doing all these updates. Look what I'm packing." And it's the book. And she's on the flight. And as she gets a certain chapter, she would give me an update and everybody else that follows her. And um, and then when she got to another particular wild chapter, which they'll have to read the book for, the Bed Bath and Beyond one, she said, "Oh my God, Mark, the flight attendants want to know why I'm rolling in the aisles, dying of laughter. They want to know what I'm reading." And it was great. And then so she said it helped her so much. Now I know Jody, so that was, I guess, lovely to hear, but not a total surprise. Then I got someone. I think she's from my hometown, maybe even from my high school. She wrote me. She goes, "I got your book. My mother's 95, and I'm reading it to her, and we're both enjoying it very much." And then the next year, she writes me. She goes, um, uh, "My mom just turned 96, and I'm reading your book again because I'm getting a lot out of it, and it's making me laugh." And I said, "That's, you know, lovely." And then maybe a month later, she said, "I just wanted you to know that my mother died 2 weeks ago, and your book helped me so much." And I'm
Oh,
like, "Oh my God!" I mean, she said, "You know, the humor just helped me get through this whole thing,"
I
and it
can
was just lovely.
imagine.
And just, yeah. So those are the things that mean the most.
Right.
If it connects on a certain level, but if it connects and helps them heal or get through the grieving process and stuff, because I don't even know if I'm done grieving. I mean, writing the book was part of the grieving process,
Sure.
and and it helps. And doing all these interviews and talking about the book keeps mom in the present, so that's all part of it too.
I think
And that's
grieving.
lovely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, and that's lovely to be able to, you know, I talk to both of my folks every day, and so when I get to share their stories with other people and they get a kick out of it, I think that's a gift to me. So
Absolutely.
that's yeah,
And
so
one
that's lovely.
response like that, I can imagine probably makes it all worth it, right? Everything that you
Yeah,
went through to write the book, just if you never got another response like that, the one would probably be worth it. And
yeah,
grieving,
yeah,
I believe
yeah,
it's an ongoing process. I don't think it ever really goes away. It just kind of changes, right?
yeah.
So I'm
Yeah,
sure that this,
and when I see other, you know, because again, we're getting in the age where the parents are all going and stuff like that, and people are constantly posting on social media that they lost this person or this person, and yeah, those of us who've been through it understand, and
Indeed.
yeah, and sympathize and empathize and all that. So yeah, it's part of life, unfortunately.
It
So
is. It is. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about your publishing process. Tell me what you did and why you did it. What steps did you take?
well, I wanted to be a published author. I
Hmm.
have to say, whether it's ego or whatever. But when I got the book in pretty good shape, I started researching publishers and agents also. Now, I dealt with agents in Hollywood. They're difficult. They're just, they're difficult. So rejection was not a surprise. So, of course, writing stuff. And no age, you read these descriptions and the research of, oh, we take extensive reviews and we take our time and we really dig into these various projects and the authors, and then 12 seconds later you get a rejection and you're
Hmm.
going, that was deep, that was nice. And then the publishers, same thing. And so you get rejected, and then this one publisher, for some reason, and I still don't know why, they rejected me pretty quickly, and I emailed them back and said, let me ask you a question. Does my living in France have anything to do with your rejection? And she said, yes, because foreign authors don't understand American marketing. And I said, I'm from Jersey. I understand marketing. And she said, send us the manuscript. So I sent the manuscript, and the acquiring editor, I guess, liked it, but she had notes. So they contacted me and they say, so and so likes what you have here, sees a lot of potential in it, and they like your voice, but we have notes. And it was a
Sure.
test. And so I said, give me the notes. And the notes were great. And it may have been some of those structural notes. I don't
Okay.
remember specifically, but I had no problem with any of them. So I spent a few weeks revising it and sent it off to them, and they said, "Okay, let's do it." And then we did the contract and stuff like that. So now I'm thinking, and then I had, in the meantime, I had another publisher contact me. Um, and I think they were a little slick, because all he said was, oh, the title. He brought up the title and then the early thing about, the early thing I say about, the $1 million check to my mom. That's all he talked about. I said, you didn't get much further, did you? And he didn't. He just like,
Oh my
oh no,
goodness.
boom, boom, and we're going to put this thing out in hardback, and we're going to put it out by Christmas, and all this other stuff. And so I said, well, so we had a nice talk, but I felt better about the other one. So
Sure.
but I did talk in, whatever speed date or so with both of
Yeah.
them, and then I got
You have to
contracts.
entertain it.
I go, and then we sent the contracts to my brother, who had an attorney who could look at this stuff. And they looked at it and they said, here are the plus and minuses between either of them. And so I went with the one that was more interested in quality and not speed.
That's
And
smart.
they said this would take about a year and a half before we could get it out. And I said, great, let's do it, because I wanted it to be as best as it could be. And so that was, again, a very a lucky decision to respond to that rejection, first of all.
Yes.
And then I'm thinking, maybe all those other agents rejected me because I live in France.
Interesting. I never would have thought that that would be a hang up, but I guess I can kind of understand it now that you mention
Yeah,
it. Good for
yeah,
you for digging in.
yeah.
Like we
And
were
then,
talking about earlier, when things are supposed to work, the stars just kind of align. We can just get out of our own way, right?
yeah,
Well
yeah, yeah,
done.
yeah. And of course, I think the publisher is very happy with the marketing that I've been doing, because
Helpful.
it's pretty extensive, and I love doing it. But boy, it's time consuming.
Yeah. Have you done
So,
any book signings? Did you go on any kind of book signing tours?
you know what? I have one in a couple of weeks from here. It's a group of expats in Montpellier, which is about an hour away,
Okay.
and they're, if I could say, Democrats abroad. And they encourage, I vote, of course, but they encourage voting, period, not just Democratic voting. And they heard about the book because it's on my email, and when I responded to them about something, they said, "Oh, we'd love to help push your book." So they're putting together this event, which of course I'll be bringing wine and books and stuff too. So that's a signing. But before it was published, there's a group here. Again, in this village, there's a lot of expats. It's still mainly French, thank
Hmm.
God, but a lot of expats, a lot of them are retired. And so I did a presentation and read a few chapters a few years ago. Actually, it's probably, well, it might have been 2 years before it was published.
Hmm.
And they seemed to like it. And it was interesting because I thought, okay, this is going to be for baby boomers. But one of the ladies stood up and she said, and she was a French lady actually, and she said, "When is this coming out? Because I want to get this for my kids." And I said, "Oh,
Wow.
there's a whole nother market I didn't even think about.
A
I
whole
want the
nother
kids to
market.
be trained well." And so that's another thing that I said, "Oh, that's it. That's very interesting." So
That's a big market too. Like I said, with the baby boomers coming
yeah,
on. Yeah.
as long as I don't have mother issues, I think we're good.
Well, if that's the case, they probably will just shelf it and not
Yeah.
even look at it
Well, they
anyway,
wouldn't
if
even
we're being
buy it.
honest,
Yeah.
right?
And I just spent a couple of weeks ago, I was at the London Book Fair,
Hmm.
and that was a lot of fun. And I have a foreign rights agent that I'm working with. So we're getting it out to the world. And I mean, the publisher's happy with the sales in the US. I wish, of course, I'm not totally happy yet, but they're pretty good for a new author.
Yeah.
And memoir is a very tough genre to sell unless you're a big celebrity or something. So that's pretty good. But we have the first country was China. So they've signed on and paid an advance up front. And so they've got a few readers over there. And so apparently American books do pretty well. So that could be very exciting. And so they were the first contract that we have, and I've got interest in a bunch of other countries. So again, that's mainly on me. So I'm going after all that stuff. And yeah, so I may
Well, it
be
sounds like
a
you're
superstar in another world.
anywhere. It sounds like you're getting traction. I'm really happy to hear that. And
Yeah,
good
yeah,
luck
yeah.
with your book
It's
signing
nice.
with your expat group.
Yeah, well, I'll have to see. I hope if nothing else, I'll get them drunk. Uh,
It'll be fun if nothing else, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, Mark, I think we may have covered this, but I just want to put it out there as a separate question. What do you want your readers to, if you can think of just one primary thing, what do you want your readers to take away from your book?
The main goal is to inspire.
Yeah.
Inspire others to take this on because I didn't really know totally what I was getting into. It was the right thing to do because of my upbringing and stuff like that, and so I didn't really look back. I mean, there's a chapter where I had some moments of doubt of
Hmm.
whether maybe I was the right guy or so for this thing, but. Um, yeah, I say it inspires. It's not a how-to book. It's a what I did book, and if they get something out of it, so it could educate and definitely entertaining.
Yes.
Again, mom was a fun lady, and hopefully some of my writing will give people a good chuckle and stuff. And so that would be yeah, if it touches people but if it makes them change and say, you know what, I'm going to take mom in, I'm going to take my
Hmm.
uncle, I'm going to help, and I get more and more encouraged as I spread the word because, even after we're starting to approach the 2 years, the sales are still very steady, and the interest in this story keeps, I think, growing, and so that's very encouraging. And again, because it's a universal story and it's timely and timeless.
It is.
And yeah, so it's not like, oh no, now the election's over, things change. It's like, no, this will continue because we're living longer,
Well,
which is
inspiring
great.
it is, and it sounds like you've even received some notes that are kind of proof in the pudding, that it does inspire people. So congratulations on that.
Yeah.
Can I
Well,
ask you a
thank you.
couple fun questions?
Oh no, not fun.
No
I didn't know
fun. You
that
don't
was
like
gonna.
anything fun, I
Let me
can
have
tell.
in honor of mom. I'm having tea.
All right. If you're
but I'm not on the commode. Okay.
okay, thanks for that disclaimer.
Just gotta make sure. Okay.
If your
I'm ready.
if your book were to be turned into a movie, who would you want cast as you?
You know, it's funny because I have, again, I write cinematically.
Yeah.
And I have a casting director who's now retired who says this should be. I bet a few people say this, but you know, Hollywood, and he's actually working on it, and so we'll see what happens. But I'll be dead and buried before it ever gets made. I think, unless I get Meryl Streep to play my mother, because she could play old and young.
Yes.
Which we need for the flashbacks. But he brought up somebody, and I thought was interesting, Bradley Cooper.
Bradley
And I think that would
Cooper.
be fine because he's of the age of I was in my 50s.
Yeah.
And also he loves his mother. I have a list of celebrities who love their mothers, and he's one of them, and also a pretty good director. And so that would be interesting. But when he first brought him up, I said, "Yeah, great. How are we going to get him?" This is when he's riding high, you know,
Right.
a year ago or so. But you never know. Meryl Streep is a Jersey girl, as I mean, my mom was originally a New Yorker, but Jersey girl for most of her life.
Yeah.
I thought would be that would be a lovely combination. So let's put
Meryl
that out
Streep
there.
and Bradley Cooper. I'll put
Yeah,
out good vibes for
and the
it.
Tweedles I don't know yet.
I hope that this gets turned into a movie someday. I do. I think it would make a
It,
fabulous movie.
I think it could be a lot of fun. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if they've dealt with this in movies really. In a long time, there was a movie, Marvin's Room,
Mhm.
with DiCaprio when he was very young, and I believe Meryl Streep. But that was pretty, yeah, that was like pretty dramatic. There was a
Yeah.
lot of crap going on with
Yeah.
that family and stuff like that. So this would be a little more, I think, uplifting.
A little less drama.
Yeah. Oh, can I tell you what the Alzheimer's thing, which I thought was pretty funny? So
Yes.
we had, house calls are so rare nowadays, right? And so at some point, probably in 2 years or maybe around after 2 years of me taking over, I get a call saying, "Hey, would your mother like a doctor who makes house calls?" And getting her to and from the doctors at this point was a process and kind of difficult for both of us. And so I said, sure. And so this lady came in. She was lovely. And she and my mom hit it off, and they were great. During a few months later, she whispers to me and she said, I think your mother has Alzheimer's. And I said, she's not, at this point, she's 91. But okay. She goes, I want to do some cognitive testing. And I said, great. Okay, do them. And mom was willing to do it. And so mom did great with the testing. They did this thing where you tell the time, you write to put the hands on the clock, you write something backwards, and you do these other tests. And I thought she did great. She did, I thought, pretty well with everything except short-term memory. You know, she
Okay.
got those five things. And she had issue with that. But when she was done, the doctor says, yeah, I believe your mother has Alzheimer's. And I said, she's 91. I would have trouble with that test. And no, I'm not taking it. Then, and then I turned to mom and said, Mom, you don't have Alzheimer's, do you? And she goes, I don't remember. Again, whether she knew it or not, that's funny.
Humor to
Uh,
the very end.
oh my gosh, she was great.
She
Yeah.
sounds like she was a lovely lady.
Yeah. Well, not 100%, but yes,
Or
let's
any
put
of
it this
us.
way. She
Mark,
was, yeah,
what book?
over. Hmm?
I'm sorry. What book changed your life?
Hmm. I was going to say Big Fish, but I think I saw the movie before.
Okay.
Or Shoeless Joe, which was the book that Field of Dreams was based on. And I'll say that because my relationship with my dad was obviously very important, but also surrounded baseball that you've read
Okay.
about. And we're going to go more into that in the next book. Um, but the father son story, I don't know if I've read a mother son one other than mine that that really did something for me. But the father-son stories kill me. So The Big Fish and Shoeless Joe, or Field of Dreams, is one of my favorite movies. Also for those for that relationship that touched me personally, and my relationship with Dad. So I'll say those two if I can do two.
Absolutely. Excellent choices. Sometimes it's hard to choose just one. So you mentioned a little bit ago that you're working on something about your time with your dad. Is that kind of what we can expect to see next from you, Mark? What is that?
Yeah, well, there's two things I touched on in Mom's book, and that's the baseball deal with Dad.
Hmm.
Actually, no, that's not the main focus. It was the trip to Italy. So in
Yes.
1995, when my dad turned 80, I took him to the little village where his father came from 100 years earlier. And it was my dad's first time to Europe, and my first time, I guess, to Europe as well. During the war, he couldn't fly, so he had to stay stateside. But he was an army chemist, and so this was a big deal. And he was also dying from heart disease, and I didn't know how severe it was at that point. But one of my brothers said we never expected him to come back. And I'm like, that might have been a nice thing to tell me before, because
Wow.
my dad was a tough cookie, and so he did struggle a bit, but he whenever I tried to help him, he'd say, "I'm not an invalid. I'm not an invalid." So he just pressed on, but we had a great time. And that might have been my first caregiving because we spent 16 days in a foreign country. Neither of us spoke Italian. I spoke a little bit. Um, and we had a deal, and that was back, for cell phones, and when the things were still the lira, and so the euro. So it was, I'm amazed because now I'm going through all the research. I shot a documentary of that, and that's helping with the writing. But I also did a memory book of that whole trip, and I made one
Hmm.
for Dad and one for me, and so I have those, and I'm going back, and it's this October will be 30 years, and it was just a really cool journey. And so that is, I have three books I was going to write. So that's one book, the Italy thing. So expanding on what the chapter was in A Cup of Tea.
Hmm.
Um, but the original thing was going to be my 8 Days with Dad. So the original title was going to be 8 Days to Heaven. And then I again would weave in all these backstories as we talked about what was going on and stuff like that. Um, but then the other book, which could be part of this book, so I could combine the three into one book, was his snack food, his half pop popcorn invention. And
Yes, the snack business.
my brother and I started that business, and it was pretty cool. And the origins of this business, which is it could be the ending of the book. Well, hopefully, people will forget by the time this thing comes out. But while we're in this village in 1995, it's a village of less than 100 people now, but it was around 200 when we were there. And my great grandfather was the mayor of this village, so that kind of helped us when we were there. And so we spent 2 days there, and that was about enough. But I shot a documentary, this whole thing, and we found all kinds of family history there, and it was just lovely. But as we're walking, probably on the last day, where the village was not very long, maybe 100 yards long, but we're walking up and we see popcorn kernels drying on a burlap sheet on the side of the road. And I asked this one guy that spoke some English, Paulo, who was kind of our interpreter for the time we were there. I said, "What is that about?" And he says, "Oh, we grow popcorn here." And I said, "Oh." I said, turned to my father. I said, "Dad, this is why you invented Nutrinuts, which was half popcorn." I said, "It's in your
Yep.
blood." And so that's that. All three stories of me and my dad and coming to Italy and this popcorn invention all came together on that mountaintop village. So
How
that's the cinematic
incredible.
ending of that book. And so once I remembered that, and again, that's in my notes from 30 years ago. Once I remembered that, I said, "Oh my God, I can weave these three books together into one book and hopefully make it a little more interesting." And
What a
so
synchronicity. Well, I'll definitely be on the lookout for it. I will definitely be
yeah.
on the lookout for it. Where can we follow you and where can we get a copy of A Cup of Tea on the Commode?
Well, if anybody Googles a cup of tea on the commode, we're
Comes right
everywhere.
up.
Obviously, Amazon has all four versions. So there's the paperback, the large print, paperback, ebook, and the audiobook. And we have everything from the Facebook, the YouTube channel, which I have about 170 little teasers, and some of the podcasts I've done, I think are there if I have those files. But most of them are teasers that I've done over the last couple of years. Even TikTok, Pinterest, Instagram, we're everywhere.
Yeah.
But Facebook, it's funny because on Facebook there's like 23,000 followers on the Cup of Tea page, but very few people follow anymore. In the beginning, before the book came out, people were going, "Oh, we love this story." As soon as the book comes out, they're like, "I'm gone." So the very little, I've got to look into that. It's very funny. And part of it may be there's a lot of people around the world that maybe don't read English very well
Right.
or not ready for that. So once we start getting other languages, it may. But my personal page, the Mark Poro Facebook page, is pretty active.
Okay.
Um, so about we deal with both of those and stuff like that. And so a cup of tea in the commode and you'll find it. It's also in Barnes and Nobles, a lot of brick and mortar stores also. And I know Kobo, a friend in New Zealand bought it on Kobo and stuff like that. So it's everywhere. And
Great. And
if you find out,
I'll put a link to your website down in the show notes as well. So
yeah,
people,
everything's there. And what's fun on the website, I added a page called bonus materials, and there's a lot of things that I talk about in the book that aren't, let's say, you don't see pictures or I go into more depth. And so memory books and the documentary actually of the Italian trip is on that. And
oh,
then more
really?
photos and more. And yeah, in our house, back in the 50s when it was bought, and then 2015 when we sold it and things like that. And so, yeah, there's some it's a lot of fun stuff in there
I'll
and
have
other
to go check that
photographs we
out.
didn't include. Yeah.
I will go check it out myself, as a matter of fact. Well, Mark, this has been a lovely conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out to chat with me about your experience of writing and your lovely 3.5 years with your mom, Genevieve.
Yeah.
It's a
Well,
heartwarming
thank you.
story.
Again, this is yeah, this is your gift to me and I thank you for that. So, yeah.
Hopefully, our paths will cross again. I can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Okay, super. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Take care.
Thanks so much for listening to For Love of Memoir. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, follow, and share the show. It really helps us reach more memoir lovers like you. You can find links to today's guest, their work, and anything we mentioned in the episode right in the show notes. Until next time, keep writing your story.